There is a kind of cold that doesn't bite. It just leans on you, slow and patient, like it has all the time in the world and you don't. That's the cold the men were riding into the night they found the hut. 6 of them, a string of half-dead cattle and a sky the color of a bruise. They thought stone walls would save them. They thought wrong about almost everything that night, except the one thing nobody wanted to believe. Because when the cowboy kicked that frozen door open, expecting an empty shelter and a place to die quietly out of the wind, something moved in the dark. And it was holding a gun. What happened inside those 4 walls over the next 2 days is a story I've never told straight through, not once, not even to my own brother. Partly because nobody would have believed it, and partly because some of it I'm still not proud of. So stay with me, because the thing that nearly killed those men wasn't the storm. It was the choice the storm forced them to make. The first thing I remember is Wade screaming a name into the wind, and the wind eating it whole before it reached my ears. I was 40 feet behind him on Delia, my old gray mule, and I could see his mouth moving and his arm pointing up the draw, but the sound never made it across. That's how you know a storm has turned mean. When a man can yell with everything he's got and the air just swallows it like it was never said. We'd left the Cooper place that morning with 1,100 head and a sky that looked like nothing. By noon, the temperature had dropped so fast my back teeth ached. By dark, we had maybe 40 cattle still on their feet and 6 men still on their horses, and the snow wasn't falling so much as flying sideways level, 1,000 little knives coming out of the northwest all at once. I keep a little ledger in my coat, always have, a stub of pencil tied to it with twine so I don't lose it. I write down the things that happen and the names of the men I ride with, because I've buried enough of them that I figured somebody ought to keep count. That night I couldn't have written my own name. My fingers were curled up like dried roots. Wade pointed again. I followed his arm up through the murk and saw it a shape that was too square to be a rock. Low stone walls. A black slab of a roof half-caved on one side. An old line shack, the kind the big outfits used to build for their winter riders 30, 40 years back, before the railroads changed who got rich and who didn't. "It'll hold," Wade shouted, and this time I caught it thin and frayed. "Stone'll hold, get 'em up." I want to tell you something about Wade before we go any further, because the rest of this won't make sense otherwise. He was 24 years old that winter, maybe 25. He had a way of setting his jaw that made older men want to slap him and younger men want to follow him, and he was wrong about as often as he was right, which is to say not as often as he thought. But he had one quality I've only seen in a handful of men in 70 years of living, and I don't have a good word for it. The closest I can get is that Wade could not leave a thing to die if there was any way under God's heaven to keep it alive. Calves, dogs, a sick old wrangler nobody else would share a fire with. Once, a sparrow with a broke wing that he carried in his shirt pocket for 9 days until it could fly off, and then watched it go like it had taken something out of him. That's a beautiful thing in a man. It's also the thing that nearly got us all killed. Hold onto both of those. We drove the last of the cattle into the lee of the wall, where the rock cut the wind down to something a body could stand in. The animals just stopped. They didn't bawl. They didn't push. They stood there with ice in their lashes and steam coming off them in ragged sheets, and they waited to find out whether they'd live, the way cattle do, with no opinion about it either way. Wade was off his horse before the rest of us, hammering at the door with the heel of his hand. Snow had packed the frame solid. Curtis, a big quiet man, used to be a blacksmith down in Tucson, hands like skillets, put his shoulder to it, and the ice cracked, and the door swung in on a darkness so complete it looked solid. "Get the lamp," Wade said. And then he stepped inside. I was 3 steps behind him with my ledger going soft in my frozen pocket, and so I saw the whole thing. The hut was one room, maybe 12 feet by 15. There was a stone hearth on the back wall with the dull red eye of a banked fire in it, which my brain registered a half-second before the rest of me did, because a banked fire means somebody banked it, and somebody banking a fire means. She came up out of the corner like the dark itself had decided to stand. A woman, thin, wrapped in what looked like every blanket and hide she owned, with her hair come loose around a face that was all bone and shadow. And in her two hands, held dead level and not shaking even a little, was an old cap-and-ball revolver pointed straight at the middle of Wade's chest. "Stop," she said. We stopped. For a long moment nobody in that room breathed loud enough to hear. The wind screamed against the stone outside, and inside there was just the four of us, me, Wade, Curtis behind me filling the doorway, and her, and the gun, and that little red eye of fire on the back wall. Wade had his hands half raised. He was looking at the gun the way a man looks at a thing he's already decided isn't the most important thing in the room. Then his eyes went past her, down to the corner she'd risen from, and I watched his whole face change. There was a child on the floor. A boy, I'd guess 5 or 6 years old, lying on a pallet of hide so close to the hearth that the firelight made his skin look painted. He wasn't moving. For one cold instant I thought he was dead, and I think Wade thought so too, and I felt that thought land in him like a fist. Then the boy coughed. A wet, tearing, terrible sound, far too big for a body that small, and the woman flinched at it, flinched at the sound of her own child suffering, but her gun hand never moved off Wade. "There's a storm," Wade said. His voice had gone soft and even, the voice he used on spooked horses. "Ma'am, there's a storm out there that's going to kill every man and animal I've got if we stand in this doorway much longer. We're not here to hurt you. We didn't know anybody was." "I'll shoot," she said. "I believe you." "I mean it. I'll shoot the first man that comes at me, and then I'll shoot the second." "I believe that too." Wade lowered his hands slow. "But you've got 6 bullets at the most in that thing, and there's a lot more than 6 of us, and we're all of us about to freeze to death, you and your boy included. So," he swallowed, "here's what I think is true. I think you've been keeping that boy alive in here all by yourself, and I think you've done it so long you forgot how to let anybody help. And I think that fire's almost out, and you're almost out of whatever's keeping it lit, and you know it." The gun didn't move, but something in her shoulders did, a tremor she couldn't stop. "My name's Wade," he said. "That's Eli behind me, old fella, he's harmless, he keeps a little book. The big one's Curtis. We got 3 more men outside and 40 head of cattle and a wagon. We came in here to live through the night, same as you've been doing every night, I'd guess, for a while now." He took one step, just one. "I'm going to come build that fire up. You can keep the gun on me the whole time. If I do one thing you don't like, you pull the trigger. That's the deal, all right." I have thought about that moment more times than I can count, because it was insane. It was the act of a man who decided the worst thing that could happen in that room was not getting shot. It was that child dying 3 feet from a fire that was going out. Wade had weighed those 2 things in about 4 seconds and come down on the side that nearly all of us, in our sensible hearts, would not have chosen. He walked to the hearth with a loaded gun tracking the back of his skull, knelt down, and started feeding sticks to the coals. The woman didn't shoot him. I came in then, easy, hands where she could see them, and Curtis after me, and we got the door shut against the storm. The men outside saw the firelight grow and understood the place was safe enough, and they got the wagon hauled close and the cattle bunched, and one by one they ducked in out of the murder of that Wind, Tom, and the Mendez boy, an old heck who was even older than me and had a cough of his own that I didn't much like the sound of. By the time the fire was throwing real heat, the woman had sat back down beside her boy. She'd lowered the gun, finally, but she kept it in her lap with her hand on it, and she watched every one of us the way a mother wolf watches the men who have cornered her den. Not afraid. Past afraid, calculating. I got my ledger out and tried to make my fingers work and got down 3 words before the pencil slipped. Stone hut. Woman. Boy. I didn't write what I was thinking, which was, This is going to cost us." It took an hour for the boy to wake. When he did, he opened his eyes and looked at all the strange men crowded into his world and didn't have the strength to be afraid of us. That's how sick he was. Fear takes energy a body doesn't always have. He just looked, and his eyes were too bright, fever bright, and his mother bent over him and said his name, Sam. She said it was just Sam, and held a tin cup of melted snow to his cracked lips. He drank a little, coughed most of it back up, closed his eyes again. She looked up and found Wade watching, and for the first time something in her face that wasn't a weapon. Just a woman at the very end of herself, looking at another human being who'd seen what she was carrying. "He's been like this for days," she said, quiet, like the words cost her. "It started in his chest, now it's everywhere. I've got no medicine. I had a little laudanum and it's gone." Her jaw worked. "I keep the fire so he stays warm, and I keep telling him his pa's coming and his pa's not coming, and I don't." She stopped, pressed her lips together until they went white. "I don't know what else to do. I've run clean out of things to do." The men got quiet. Even the wind seemed to drop for a second, though I expect that was just my ears. Wade said, "Where's his pa?" And she looked at him with an expression I've spent 40 years trying to forget, and she said, "Coming up the same trail you did, 2 days back, maybe less in this." She turned the old revolver over once in her hands, slow, like it had gotten heavy. "And mister, when he gets here, every one of you is going to wish you'd taken your chances with the storm." The fire popped. Somewhere outside, far off, a coyote or a wolf or the wind itself made a sound like grieving. And that's how the first night ended. 6 freezing men, 40 dying cattle, a sick child, a woman with a gun, and somebody out in all that white coming closer with every hour. I wrote one more line in my ledger before the lamp guttered. "His pa is coming," I wrote. But she didn't say it like a wife. By the gray of the second morning, the boy was worse, and I had figured out that the woman had lied to us about almost nothing, except the one thing that mattered most. Let me back up. We'd slept in shifts, those of us who slept. The storm hadn't broken. It had only changed its mind about how to kill us, going from knives to a slow, smothering white that piled up against the door and the window hole and the gaps in the caved roof, until the inside of that hut felt less like a shelter and more like a grave somebody had thoughtfully kept warm. Heck's cough had gotten deeper in the night. Curtis hadn't slept at all. He just sat by the door with his big hands open on his knees, watching the woman, watching the boy, watching nothing. Her name was Naomi. She gave it up sometime around the blackest hour, the way people give things up when they're too tired to hold them anymore. And here is the part she lied about, which I worked out slow, listening, the way an old man listens, by saying little and missing nothing. The man coming up the trail was not Sam's father. Sam's father was dead, had been near 2 years. I gathered that from the way she talked to the boy when she thought we were all asleep, low, with her mouth right against his hot forehead, telling him his pa was waiting on the other side of being sick, telling him his pa would be so proud how brave he'd been. She wasn't lying to us when she said his pa was coming. She was lying to her son. There's a difference, and it about broke me to understand it. The man coming up the trail was named Royce Deal, and he was the one Sam's father had owed money to, and when Sam's father died of a bad heart in a worse winter, Royce Deal had decided the debt didn't die with him. He decided it transferred. To the widow. To whatever the widow had, which was a half section of hardpan, a milk cow, and a boy. Naomi had taken the boy and run rather than find out whatever the widow had was going to come to mean. She'd been running, in one direction or another, for 14 months. The line shack was just the place the running had stopped, because the boy got sick, and a sick child is an anchor you can't cut loose no matter how fast the thing behind you is coming. She told us this in pieces, over hours, while she spooned snow water into a child too weak to swallow it. She didn't tell it to make us pity her. She told it because Wade asked, straight out, "Why's a man coming through a storm like this after one woman?" And she'd looked at the gun in her own lap and looked at her boy, and decided the truth was less dangerous than letting 6 armed strangers guess. When she finished, nobody said anything for a long while. Then Tom, the youngest of us after Wade, a decent enough kid but green and scared, and there's no judging a scared man at 20 in a blizzard, Tom said the thing the rest of us were thinking and had the sense not to say. "He's not after us," Tom said, quiet, looking at the floor. "He's after her. We could," he stopped, made himself go on. "We could be gone before he gets here. Take our chances on the trail south once the wind drops. It ain't our fight." And there it was, the thing the storm had carried in with it, the choice. I want to be honest with you, because I promised I would be at the start, and a story isn't worth telling if the man telling it makes himself the hero. I thought Tom was right. God help me, I did. I was 68 years old that winter, and I'd already buried more men than I'd kept, and every instinct I owned was screaming the same arithmetic Tom had just said out loud. It wasn't our fight. We'd come in here to survive a storm, not to stand between a desperate woman and a man cruel enough to chase her through one. We had no medicine for the boy. We had no quarrel with Royce Deal. We had 40 head of cattle that were our actual responsibility and a long way to drive them. Every reason in the world said, when the sky clears, you ride. I looked at Wade to see him thinking the same thing. He wasn't. He was looking at the boy. At Sam, who had woken up just enough to be looking back, those fever-bright eyes fixed on Wade's face with the bottomless trust that sick children give to anyone who seems to know what they're doing. And Wade was holding the boy's small hot hand in his 2 cold ones, and his jaw was set in that way that made older men want to slap him. And I knew before he opened his mouth, that there wasn't going to be any riding south. "Nobody's leaving," Wade said. Tom started to speak. "Nobody's leaving," Wade said again, and he didn't raise his voice, and that was somehow worse. "You want to ride out into that and freeze, Tom, that's your business, I won't stop you. But I'm not getting up off this floor and stepping over a sick kid to go save my own skin from a thing that ain't even hunting me. I won't do it. I'd rather take the bullet." "Wade," I said. "Eli." He looked at me, and there was something in his face that I'd been pretending not to see for 2 days. He was scared. Of course he was. He just wasn't going to let the fear be the thing that decided. "You taught me to keep count of the dead. You remember telling me that. You said somebody ought to. Well," his voice cracked just a hair, "I'm not going to put a 5-year-old in your book to save myself a fight. I can't. I'd rather you write me in instead." The hut was dead silent except for the boy's breathing, which had a rattle in it now. A thin, wet rattle on every draw. Naomi was staring at Wade like she'd never seen anything like him. And the truth is, neither had I, and I'd known him 3 years. I closed my ledger. I put the pencil away. And I said the only thing a man could say, which was, "Then we'd best figure out how to keep you out of it." Because that was the thing. Choosing to stand isn't the same as knowing how. Wade had made the brave decision. Now somebody had to make it survivable, and that, it turned out, was going to be the heavy part, heavier than the choice itself. We had the rest of that day and one more night before Royce Deal arrived. We didn't know that yet. We thought we might have hours. So we spent the day doing the 2 things that mattered, trying to save the boy and getting ready for the man. The boy first. Curtis, the big quiet blacksmith, turned out to know something none of the rest of us did. He'd lost 2 children of his own to the same kind of chest fever, years back in Tucson, and he'd watched the doctors who couldn't save them, and he'd remembered. He had Naomi boil snow water hard over the fire, and he held the boy upright in his huge, careful hands and made him breathe the steam. And he packed wet cloths warm on the small, heaving chest, and he kept the fire roaring even though it meant burning the last of the wood faster than we could replace it. "It's the breathing that kills 'em," Curtis said, low, not looking at anybody. "The fever you can fight, it's when the breathing gets too small to matter." His jaw moved. "You keep the air wet and warm, you give the lungs a chance. That's all you can do. Give 'em the chance and pray they're strong enough to take it." He worked over that boy for 6 hours without once standing up. A man who'd lost everything to this exact sickness, on his knees in the firelight, fighting it again for a stranger's child. I have seen courage on battlefields, and I'll tell you it wasn't braver than that. And while Curtis fought the sickness, the rest of us got ready for the man. We had the wind on our side in a strange way. Anyone coming up that draw would come slow and half frozen and unable to hear or see much. We had stone walls and one door and one small window hole. We had Wade and Curtis when he could be spared, and me and Tom, who I'll say this for him. Once the choice was made, once it was clear we were staying, he never spoke of leaving again. He just got scared and stayed anyway, which is the only kind of brave most of us ever manage. Wade put it plain. We don't kill him if we don't have to. We're not murderers, and I won't make us into them. We block the door, we hold the high ground inside, we let him know there's 6 of us and he can't have her. A man chasing one woman, he does it because he thinks it's easy. We make it not easy. Most men like that, when it stops being easy, they find someplace easier to be. And if he's not most men, I asked. Wade was quiet a second. Then we do what we have to, he said, and you keep your book handy. Naomi had been listening to all of it. And late that day, while Curtis bent over her boy, she came and sat by Wade where he was wedging timber against the door, and she said something I'll carry to my grave. Why, she said, just that at first. Then, you don't know me, you don't know him. You had a clean way out of this an hour ago and you threw it in the fire. Men don't do that, not for strangers. Not ever in my experience, and I have got a lot of experience with men and what they will and won't do. Her voice was flat and exhausted and absolutely sincere. So I need to know why, because if there's a price on it, I'd rather know now. Wade kept working the timber, didn't look at her, and when he answered, it wasn't what I expected, and I don't think it was what she expected either. My ma had a man like Royce Deal come after her once, he said, when I was about Sam's size, and there wasn't anybody in the stone hut, you understand. There wasn't 6 men and a fire, there was just her and me and the man. He set the timber, tested it. So no, there's no price. I'm just paying back something I owe to somebody who's been dead 20 years and you happen to be the one standing where she'd be standing. He finally looked up. Now go sit with your boy, he's calling for you. I'll watch the door. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something she hadn't done in front of any of us, not once in 2 days. She cried, just for a second. One hand pressed flat over her mouth to keep it quiet so the boy wouldn't hear. Then she wiped her face on her sleeve, hard, and got up, and went back to Sam, and was a stone again by the time she knelt beside him. The fever broke a little before midnight. Curtis felt it first, felt the boy's forehead go from a furnace to something almost human, and he made a sound I'd never heard him make, a kind of broken breath, and he said, There it is. There's the chance. Come on, son, take it. And Sam, somewhere down in the deep place sick children go, took it. His breathing eased. The rattle gentled. He slept real sleep, not fever sleep, and his mother lay down beside him with her face against his hair and didn't pretend to be a stone anymore. We'd won that fight, the small one, the one against the sickness. But you'll remember there were 2 things coming for us in that storm, and only one of them was a fever. I was sitting up by the window hole near dawn, ledger open on my knee, when I saw the dark shape come up out of the white at the bottom of the draw. A man on a staggering horse, moving slow, moving sure. I woke Wade with a hand on his shoulder. He's here, I said. The man came up out of the storm like something the storm had made. I have tried over the years to describe Royce Deal to people, and I always come up short because the truth is he wasn't much to look at. That was the thing nobody believes. You expect a man who'd chase a widow and a sick child 14 months across 3 territories to look like the devil. He didn't. He looked like a tired rancher. Middling height, gray stubble, a good coat going to ruin in the wet. He looked like somebody's uncle. The only thing that gave him away was his eyes, and you couldn't see those until he was close. They were patient. That's the only word. The patient eyes of a man who had never once in his life been told no and made it stick, and who had come to believe, the way some men do, that patience and cruelty were the same virtue. He left his dying horse at the bottom of the draw and came up the last of it on foot, and he stopped maybe 30 feet from the hut, in the lee where the wind let up enough to talk, and he looked at the smoke coming off our chimney and the cattle bunched against the wall, and he understood, the way an animal understands, that the situation had changed. "Naomi," he called, not loud, he didn't need loud. "I know you're in there, I can see the smoke." A pause. "I can also see you found yourself some company, that's all right, I'm a reasonable man. I'll explain it to them same as I explained it to you. You owe me. Your dead husband owed me and the debt's good, and I've come a long way in bad weather to collect it. Now send the boy out where I can see he's alive and we'll talk about the rest like Christians." Inside the hut, nobody moved. Naomi had Sam in her arms. The boy was awake, weak but clear-eyed, the fever gone, and he'd heard the voice, and he'd gone white and still against his mother in a way that told me everything I needed to know about what 14 months of running had done to a 5-year-old. Wade looked at me. I looked at Curtis. Curtis was already moving to the door. And Wade stepped out into the cold to meet the man. I went with him because I'm an old fool, and because somebody had to be a witness, and because I had it in my head that a man won't shoot another man down so easy with a gray-haired grandfather standing right there writing it in a book. That was my whole contribution. I stood next to Wade in the snow, and I held my open ledger and my stub of pencil where Royce Deal could see them, like they were a weapon, like they meant anything at all. "She's not coming out," Wade said. "Neither's the boy, you can turn around." Royce Deal looked at him a long moment, those patient eyes. "Son," he said, almost kind, "you don't know what you've stepped into." "I know exactly what I've stepped into," Wade said. "I've been standing in it since I was 6 years old. You're a man who hurts people who can't stop you, and you've gotten away with it so long you forgot there's a kind of people who'll stop you for free, just on principle, just because it's the right thing and somebody ought to." He didn't reach for his gun. He just stood there. "There's 6 of us in this storm and 1 of you. Your horse is dying down there and you've got no shelter for 100 miles but the one you're looking at, and you're not coming into it. So here's the only thing I've got to offer you, and I'm offering it because the woman in there taught me something about mercy I didn't expect to learn this week. You can come in, out of the storm. You can sit on the far side of the fire from her and you can live through the night, and in the morning you can ride south and never come back. That's it. That's the whole deal. Warmth in your life, in exchange for letting it go." I watched Royce Deal weigh it. And I understood, watching him, that Wade had made a terrible miscalculation, the same one his goodness made him prone to, because Wade had offered the man a door out. Wade believed, all the way down, that even a man like this would rather live and let live than die over a debt. Wade believed there was a floor under everybody. There wasn't, not under Royce Deal. "No," said Royce Deal, almost gently, and went for his gun. He was fast for a tired man. He was faster than Wade, who had never in his life shot anyone and whose hand, I think, hesitated for the half-second that goodness costs. But he wasn't faster than Curtis, who had been a blacksmith and had hands like skillets, and had spent 2 days watching this man's shadow stretch toward a child he'd already decided to keep alive. Curtis had come out the door behind us without a sound, and when Royce Deal's pistol cleared his coat, Curtis was already there, not with a gun. He didn't even own one, but with his whole enormous body, and he took Royce Deal down into the snow the way an avalanche takes down a fence, and the pistol went off once into the white sky, and then it was over. It was just over, fast and ugly and not like the stories. Curtis held him down in the snow with one knee and both hands, and the patient eyes weren't patient anymore. They were just a man's eyes, scared, and Wade was shouting, "Don't, Curtis, don't. We're not, don't make us that." And Curtis, God bless him, didn't. He could have. He had every reason and the strength to do it easy. He didn't. He just held the man pinned in the freezing snow until the fight went out of him. And then we tied his hands with a length of catch rope. And that was that. We kept Royce Deal tied by the door all that last night on the cold side, away from the fire, which was more mercy than he'd have shown any of us. He didn't speak. The patient eyes had gone somewhere far away. I think, and I've turned this over a lot, I think being stopped was a thing so foreign to him that some part of him simply couldn't account for it, and had shut off rather than try. In the morning, the storm broke. It broke the way bad storms do, all at once, the wind just dying like it had used itself up, and the sun came over the white world so bright it hurt, and the silence after 2 days of howling was almost holy. We dug out. We found that most of the 40 cattle had lived, huddled against the warm stone, which Wade took as a sign of something, though he never said what. Heck's cough had settled into his chest for good and would carry him off come spring. But that morning he was alive and cussing and glad of the sun, and that's all any of us get promised. We rode Roysdale down to the territorial law at the settlement 2 days south, tied to his own recovered horse, and we gave our statements, and there was a thing in his saddlebag, a paper, a real legal paper that turned out to be why he'd chased her so hard and so long. It wasn't a debt at all. The debt was a lie he'd told her to make her run, to make her think she was the one in the wrong. The paper was a deed. Sam's father, before he died, had quietly bought a piece of land that turned out to have water on it, good water, in a country where water was the only thing worth killing for. It belonged to the boy. Roysdale had spent 14 months trying to make a frightened widow sign it away before she ever found out what she was sitting on. She found out in a lawman's office with her healthy son on her hip, and I watched it land on her, and she laughed, one cracked, disbelieving laugh, and then she didn't laugh for a while. We parted ways that spring. Naomi took Sam and the deed and went back north to claim the water and the land, and the last I heard, years on, she'd built something there. A real place. Sam grew up tall, they said. I never saw either of them again, which is how most of the true stories go. You save somebody, or you help save them, and then they walk off into their own life that has nothing more to do with you. And that's right. That's the way it ought to be. The reward for keeping a thing alive isn't getting to keep it. It's just knowing it's out there, living. Curtis and I rode on with the outfit. He never talked about his own dead children again, and I never asked. Some men carry the fire that warms strangers and never once turn it on their own grief. I've stopped trying to understand it. I just took my hat off to it. And Wade. Wade went on being Wade. Still couldn't leave a thing to die. Still set his jaw and made older men want to slap him. I rode with him another 4 years, and then I got too old for the trail, and we shook hands, and he said, "You still got that book, Eli?" And I said I did, and he said, "Don't put me in it for a good while yet," and I said I'd do my best. I'm an old man now. I've outlived nearly everyone in these pages, Wade included, though he made it a good long while, longer than a man like him had any right to, given how often he stepped between people and the things hunting them. I still have the ledger. The stone hut is on a page near the middle, and the ink's gone brown and most of it's just names. But there's one line I added years after, in a different hand, an old man's shaky hand, down at the bottom of that page, after I'd had a long time to think about what happened in that hut and what it meant, and why I've never been able to tell it straight through until now.